Welcome to the Independent Women's Forum Book Talk with Miranda Devine. Thank you all for coming out tonight to hear Miranda discuss Laptop from Hell, her important book on sex, drugs, money, and power. Or maybe it's depravity, corruption, and treason. We decided to have this event because for a book that delves into some pretty critical information about who owns the Biden family, we saw it was not getting the coverage it deserved. Fox has given it a lot of play, and so have a couple of other conservative outlets, but most have been silent, and the mainstream media more silent still. Last week, with regard to her own spying scandal, Hillary Clinton explained the theory behind this behavior. If no one touches a story except Fox and the New York Post, it's possible to claim that the story is false, but Fox knows its viewers are stupid enough to believe it. Someone's viewers are stupid, but I wouldn't say it's Fox's. Tonight's event is being recorded by C-SPAN. That slightly undermines our complaint that the mainstream media has ignored this critical book, but we'll take it. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to note that the Independent Women's Forum is now almost 30 years old. We started as a group of women coming out of the first Biden administration who were unhappy with the way conservative women were being portrayed in the media and in just all around. We were unhappy with the way our viewpoints and our issues were covered. This hit home during the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill Supreme Court showdown, an early iteration of Believe All Women. Back then, there was only Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum, which had single-handedly defeated the Equal Rights Amendment, no mean feat, but they didn't seem so effective in media battles in the 90s. On any TV report, you'd have liberal to left-wing women in power suits making their points, and then a very pretty, slightly fussy woman in a dress would make the conservative case, and it would be unrelatable. IWF intended to be an organization that reflected the real lives of and concerns of today's women. We believe that all issues are women's issues, from the economy to child care policy to the regulatory state to revolution. If it matters, we're on it. Under the leadership of Carrie Lucas, who will be tonight's interlocutor, IWF has grown like wildfire. In the past decade, we added the Independent Women's Voice, the political action arm. And just this year, the Independent Women's Network, a national cyber networking operation that will build grassroots groups across the country. Plus, we now have a legal center staffed by first-rate conservative female attorneys. And as soon as it's a little better funded, it will start suing people just like the left. Carrie has accomplished all this while raising 5 lovely children, all of whom are brilliant and have excellent manners. These days, she's making the case against the Fairfax County schools and their mask policies. We are thrilled to have New York Post columnist Miranda Devine here tonight. When Hunter Biden's laptop emerged during the election, I took a look at it, and though I am not especially squeamish, came to various videos I just couldn't watch. So I cannot imagine that recording and explaining what was on those laptops was pleasant. But as the Hillary acolytes like to say, nevertheless, she persisted. And kudos to the New York Post for backing this important work, which the rival media claimed was Russian propaganda. Finally, it is all very well that a rich and slightly decadent country pays foreign labor to pick our fruit and clean our homes. But it's a very different thing altogether when American journalists simply will not do the job of reporting. So we need to import Australian columnists. Hunter's laptop appeared in public. No one had to dig it up. When it appeared, we should have seen a Watergate-like scrum between reporters competing to break the news. But the news was devastating about the Democratic Party's candidate, so no one said a word. So we're doubly grateful to Ms. Devine for her bravery and her hard work. At this point in her career, she's the queen of all tabloids across the Anglosphere. She has dominated coverage here and previously in Australia and England. We're grateful that she went through these sordid and pathetic records of the president's son. Hunter Biden is one sick puppy, and history will not look kindly on the way he and his father sold our nation to its enemies. But thanks to Miranda, we will have a record. So without further ado, Miranda Devine and Carrie Lucas.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks everybody for being here. We haven't had an in-person event in a while like this, and I'm so thrilled that so many folks came out and is getting ready to kind of resume normal life. But gosh, today feels anything but normal with the news coming out of Ukraine, and I felt like this was just a perfect time, if there's, with all the crazy news about what's going on overseas, to have this conversation, because so much of this is about foreign affairs and really how America has been mishandling some of our responsibilities. But the first thing, when I started reading your book, which I enjoyed so much, it was almost overwhelming because there was such an avalanche of scandals, and each tidbit was worthy of its own congressional investigation. So I was hoping you could kind of set the stage a little bit by what it was like to be on the receiving end of this, and the process you went through to kind of untangle all the information that was in this laptop, which fell into your hands.
Thanks, Carrie. Look, I think untangling is the perfect word, because this laptop is a complete mess, like Hunter Biden's personal life. It's full of, explicit porn, homemade porn with, prostitutes, the women that he was having relationships with, and anyone else. He was obsessed with every aspect of his body and his personal life, so he videotaped everything. So you have to wade through that layer. And I think that got a lot of publicity, obviously, for the prurient nature of it. I mentioned in one story about one photograph where he balances M&Ms on his penis and takes photographs of it. That got much more coverage than other, probably more important things. So I've tried to balance in the book, give a taste of that sort of prurient, depraved material that's in the laptop. But of course, far more important than that is the material that takes a while to dig down and find, and that's the emails, the text messages, the sort of little trail of breadcrumbs that leads you to an absolutely gobsmacking, shocking revelation. But the laptop alone is not enough. It is one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. It is buttressed by material from Tony Bobulinski, who was one of Hunter Biden's business partners, a real American patriot, a naval veteran, a hero. He came forward before the election, seeing how the New York Post, our story that we'd published 3 weeks before the election, was being buried. He came forward to corroborate it, and he handed over the material that he had on his devices to the FBI. And that material corroborated a lot of what was on the laptop, but it also augmented it with, for instance, WhatsApp messages, and where Hunter and his partners were a lot more free and easy about what they said. And then the other piece of the jigsaw puzzle is some really excellent work done by 2 Republican senators who were traduced as, Kremlin operatives, that's just the Democrats' go-to, is they regard, or they pretend that their opponents are Russian propagandists. So that was Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, and they conducted a terrific, very exhaustive investigation into one aspect of the corruption to do with Ukraine and this corrupt energy company, Burisma, that was paying Hunter Biden $83,000 a month to sit on its board.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's so many different stories of different corruptions and different kind of sloshing money that was coming towards the influence selling. If you would, if you're reaching a new audience where we're excited that C-SPAN is covering this. If you had to give the one example where you thought that this was going to kind of encapsulate the corruption and why Americans should be kind of appalled at the idea of what was going on in terms of this money that was coming in that was obviously corruption and unethical behavior.
Well, the one moment that really had me reel away from the laptop and just have to go for a walk and just shake my head and think, I cannot believe I've seen this. And it was only possible really with the Bobulinski mixing those up. And that was the biggest deal that Hunter Biden and his uncle Jim Biden had done so far with the Chinese. Now, they were joint venture partners with energy company in China called CEFC, but it wasn't just an energy company. This was the capitalist arm of President Xi's Belt and Road Initiative, which of course is China's imperialist push into the rest of the world. And the biggest deal that CEFC was going to do was with Russia. And Vladimir Putin, shades of today, had been pushed into a corner by European sanctions on Russia after the downing of MH17, that Malaysian Airlines flight over Ukraine. And he then was forced into the arms of President Xi, who is an expansionist leader. And President Xi decided that he was going to buy a big chunk of Rosneft, which is the Russian state-owned energy company. So this was a marriage of China and Russia. Disastrous for America. It's now happening again. But it didn't happen because President Trump came into office and he had assigned Attorney General then Jeff Sessions to disrupt China's sort of business invasion of America. And so very quickly, one of his business partners was arrested at JFK. The boss of CEFC was disappeared in China, and that deal for China to buy Rosneft suddenly fell apart, and China had to pay Russia, I think, $10 million in compensation. So that was a close call. But that was this crackhead son of Joe Biden couldn't tie his shoelaces, could not conduct his personal life in any normal fashion. He was out of it most of the time. He was had a raging crack addiction, a raging sex, porn, prostitute addiction. His personal life was in disarray. He was fighting with everyone. And this guy and his bumbling Uncle Jim, Joe Biden's younger brother, were right in the heart of the biggest deal, this geopolitical landmine that was going to be so detrimental to America's national security. They were right in the heart of it. They were joint venture partners and were going to benefit enormously. And on top of that, Joe Biden was the 10% partner. That was the 10% for the big guy deal. And Joe Biden was going to, when he finished being vice president, Hunter Biden had already made up a nameplate in DC in a building called, I think, the Swedish House. They had an office in there, and on the door was going to be Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, CEFC America, the Belt and Road Initiative, the American version, and that was Joe Biden, future president, former vice president, was there, and it just fell apart because of Donald Trump. But now we're back at square one again.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously this is, I was thinking about how interesting it is that a rarity where you have your source is the president's son. You have him in his own words. You have essentially all the correspondence, everyone who is emailing him, these videos. It was just an amazing amount of access that, for people who usually try to keep the media at bay. And as much as this is a story about Hunter Biden, I think I would love for you to talk a little bit about Joe Biden's role in this, because there was, I found it very interesting, the the exchanges that they had on a personal level, and then how just completely ridiculous it is for the president to have said he didn't know about this, because he was so many times he was there with his son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, you're spot on. The reason for the book, the reason that it's important is not about Hunter Biden, who's a 52-year-old, a supposedly reformed drug addict. That's his personal life. Who cares? That's often what people attack me and say, why are you delving into ruining his privacy and so on. It's not about Hunter Biden. It's about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is at the top of this family business. He is the product they are selling, and he is intimately involved. He is directing it. He is introducing Hunter to the important people at the top of the Russian or the Chinese or the Ukrainian or the Romanian or the Kazakhstani hierarchy that is going to give him the money. Because in China, for instance, when Hunter Biden got off Air Force One in 2013 with his father, to Chinese eyes, it was obvious what was happening. Hunter Biden was a princeling. In China, in these corrupt countries, you don't give the money to the top official. You give it to their children or their family member. And in China, these sons and daughters of the privileged are called princelings. So the American journalists on Air Force Two for that trip with Joe Biden saw nothing peculiar about his middle-aged son coming along and being introduced to all the higher-ups at the CCP, for Joe Biden to be shaking the hand of Hunter Biden's new Chinese business partner who tipped him into this enormous deal, this firm that he was given a 10% stake in for nothing, and that ended up in 2019 it had $2.5 billion worth of funds under management. And the other thing is that from the laptop, we know that Joe Biden financially benefited personally from Hunter Biden's business deals. So we don't have a lot, but there is a little bit, and it's very damning, and that is that there were shared bank accounts, there were shared debit cards, and there was also some evidence of that Hunter Biden was actually paying the household bills for Joe Biden. There was a monthly AT&T phone bill, just a couple $100, but there were also some evidence of bills for maintenance on his mansion, one of his mansions in Delaware. So, a retaining wall being fixed, some painting, some shutters being repaired, air conditioning being replaced in a cottage on the grounds, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. And it only came to light because the Bidens apparently are notorious around Delaware for not paying their bills, because to the local tradesmen it's supposed to be such an honour to work for Joe Biden that, you wouldn't want to let money get in the way. But some of these tradesmen were pressing to get their bills paid. I mean, they were $3,000-4,000 each. It's a lot to a small tradesman. So these bills were maybe 9 months old, and it came to the surface. That was how it arrived in the laptop. But I am sure there is a lot of other money that the FBI and the US Attorney in Delaware would have access to that. We saw Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson had some access to these suspicious activity reports in the banks. They're now subpoenaing people that are appearing in the grand jury in Delaware. So if someone wants to pull those threads, there is so much to discover about the president and his family.
Yeah, I bet that I speak for everyone in the room that we've found that the wheels of justice turn very slowly, yes, especially when there is a Democratic politicians that are under investigation. And so I just saw that Jonathan Turley had a piece, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, that on that investigation or the grand jury that it's still in force and collecting testimony in Delaware. Is that, if this seems like there's so much here that seems like obviously criminal, and I wondered if you could speak about what the kind of the situation is in terms of those investigations, or what the potential is if there will be justice or any actual consequences for any of this.
Well, I guess it's like the Durham investigation. There really have been very few leaks from this investigation into Hunter Biden's business affairs. There's another one going on into his Uncle Jim. Now, tax evasion, we know that they're looking at that because Hunter Biden told us himself after the election, but also supposedly they're looking at money laundering and some sort of foreign agent registration stuff. So, I mean, if they want to, there are multiple crimes that you can find on the laptop. So what we know so far is that in May 2019, which was a few weeks after Joe Biden announced his candidacy for president, this grand jury, or the US Attorney David Weiss in Delaware, subpoenaed JP Morgan Chase Bank for bank transactions to do with Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and two of Hunter's business partners, Devin Archer and Eric Schwerin. And specifically, they asked for anything to do with the Bank of China. Now, I know from the laptop and from Bob Linsky's material, there's a lot of that Chinese money sloshed through tens of millions of dollars. So they're getting that. Now, they're one of the names on one of these suspicious activity reports from JP Morgan Chase that I've seen is a woman called Zoe Keston. And she was an I don't know if you'd call her a girlfriend, but a woman who spent a long time with Hunter at Chateau Marmont in Hollywood when he went on one of his months-long crack benders in 2018 after he got a big payout from China. So she was there, and she was in a lot of photographs and videos. And so they had, as he always had with all the women in his life, a rocky relationship. But she is named on one of those suspicious activity reports because of quite a lot of money had gone into her bank account. And she testified before the grand jury and apparently talked about his wild spending sprees because he's that 2018 in particular, he was, staying at Chateau Marmont. He had his drug addiction was incredible, prostitutes, several times a day. And he had drug dealers parading through the hotel room who were stealing everything in sight, and he was cooking crack, and he kept on having his laptops and his phones and his wallet stolen, and it was a very expensive several months bender for him.
Yeah, that is kind of the, I believe it was very early in the book when you talk about how he loses an $8,000 jacket at a strip club and is really mad about it and is trying to track down this jacket. And throughout this, there's such a tremendous lack of responsibility, in particular with somebody, I bet that there's a lot of folks here are used to knowing that the idea of like classified materials or this idea of not being somebody you should be open to blackmail. And obviously with, we heard this a lot under, with President Trump with the whole like Russia narrative that the left was trying to push that, he might be being blackmailed of something he did. And my goodness, having read your book now and being aware of some of what is out there and knowing of all the other things that must be, as you said, sloshing around out there of information on him, is there a thought that he might be that his father may be compromised by any of the other information that's out there by foreign leaders?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. And I mean, it's particularly salient today when, Russia is invading Ukraine and Americans are concerned about being pulled deeper into a European war. And, we have a president whose family has been paid money from Russian oligarchs at the right hand of Vladimir Putin. Not just money, one transaction was $3.5 million that went into the bank account of one of Hunter's business partners in America. And, the money that he was getting from Ukraine, another Russia-aligned oligarch was in charge of that company, Burisma, the owner of that company. Now, he was a former energy minister of the former Russia-aligned government who was paying Hunter Biden this $1 million a year payment. And Joe Biden was warned about that several times by some sort of mid-level State Department officials and ignored that. One of them buttonholed him on Air Force Two on the way to Ukraine. One of them came into his office. And so there's just been no accountability here. And there's so many people who know so much and at the very least, I think that the American people should know as much about Joe Biden and his family's business dealings in Ukraine and Russia and China as do Vladimir Putin and President Xi. And the reason they don't know is because the American media, the establishment, the prestige media of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so on, they blocked it. Big tech censored the story, and you had people like John Brennan and other, former security and intelligence operatives who then gave the fig leaf to Joe Biden that the laptop was Russian disinformation. So the American people were kept in the dark before the election, and the proper due diligence they were not able to do on one of the candidates for president.
Yeah, I'm going to open this up for questions. I know we've got a great audience that's going to have a lot of questions, and as we kind of get the first person queued up, I just want to kind of ask you to talk a little bit more about that, because I do think that as much scandal as there is on the laptop and in the book about what the Bidens, I feel like the scandal with the media is almost more alarming, because it's not just the misdeeds of one family and some corrupt kind of upper crust. This is kind of goes to the heart of what journalism is and isn't. And it's amazing to think of the consequences. And you talk about that a little bit in your book's closing, that this really was an attempt to subvert the election outcome. You wonder almost who's pulling the strings of some of those companies. So I wonder if you had any kind of perspective from the New York Post and from others that you have interacted with, if they were surprised at the extent of the media blockout and just how dug in people were to try to silence this information that you have brought to light.
I think that Trump just changed everything. Journalists at those organisations that I mentioned just decided to throw out every, ancient aspect of journalistic ethics because the means justified the end. They had to get rid of Donald Trump. Didn't matter who Joe Biden was. He could have been the devil incarnate, and they were going to ensure that he won, or they would do whatever they could. And I guess I wasn't really surprised that the other media, because there's competition, obviously, and we had the laptop and they didn't. So ignoring it was kind of a normal competitive instinct, I suppose, although you'd think they'd try and find their own copy of the laptop. But no, what actually surprised me was Facebook and Twitter, how brazen they were at just displaying their power. To the New York Post is the fourth largest newspaper in the country. It's the oldest newspaper in the country. And they took it on themselves a couple of hours after our first story was published to censor it. Twitter blocked the New York Post's account for 2 weeks, until a few days before the election. And, a little while after that, they deplatformed the sitting president of the United States. And even Emmanuel Macron in France was horrified by that, because these are unaccountable, corporate, global kind of oligopolies who are more powerful than the leader of the free world. That's what they are. And the disgusting thing for me was that Facebook and Twitter did that on really spurious pretexts. Twitter said that we had violated their hacking material policies, which there was nothing hacked, and they admitted it afterwards, that it was a mistake. Jack Dorsey said it was a mistake to lock us. And Facebook, stopped us because they were going to do a fact check. Well, they never did the fact check, and I know they didn't, because the way you would fact check this email that was our first story is you would go to the other recipients of the email, and I know they haven't, because I've talked to those people and they've never been contacted by Facebook. So it was just a lie, and it was all done for partisan purposes to make sure that Donald Trump didn't win the election. And that's terrifying, and we know that it made a material difference to the outcome of the election, because there was a poll done by the Media Research Centre, and they found that about half of Biden voters had no idea about this scandal or the laptop or anything, and 10% of them, if they had known, would have changed their vote. And this is an election decided by 45,000 votes in a handful of battleground states, so that could have made a difference.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Well, I want to get to some audience members. Would somebody have a question? Just raise your hand and we can bring you the microphone. Great.
Hi. Congratulations on your book. It's really a feat of journalism and well done. The FBI had the laptop first, and are they still looking at it? Could something come out of that? And why do you think they held on to it so long without any doing any or coming to the public with any of the materials in it?
Well, I guess there's two answers. They're lazy and incompetent, or they were corrupt. They've had it for a long time, and let's hope that what the U.S. Attorney in Delaware is doing is based on the material in the laptop. I'm still willing to have faith in our justice system to do the right thing. It may be slow, but we're seeing with the Durham report that, good things are happening. And I think that's all we can expect is that, the truth is displayed. And unfortunately, I think the media is falling down on its part of the bargain. But let's hope that the justice system, even if it's slow, that it's thorough and that ultimately people are held accountable. And then, of course, if the Republicans win back the House and the Senate, they have said, or some of them have said, that they will be holding proper inquiries and they'll have the subpoena power and so on to call people like Hunter Biden, but many others, to testify about what they know about this corrupt influence peddling operation. But the Bidens aren't the only people that have done this. I think Joe Biden is a master of it. In Washington, he's been doing it for decades from Delaware. But, I think there are people on both sides of the aisle who have profited from selling their influence. And I think, Washington is a very corrupt town, dare I say. And I'm not sure if people have really come to grips with that.
Yeah, thank you. More questions from the audience? Okay, please.
Miranda, thank you for being here tonight. I read your book. It's wonderful, everybody. You're a really good writer. I'm a slow reader, and I read your book in like 2 hours. I couldn't put it down. So thank you. It was disturbing on so many accounts, but the one thing I thought was really interesting, and I'm really glad that you put it in the book, was about his teeth.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was a heavy drug user and a crack user, and as many of you know, when you use drugs like that, it does affect the teeth. So I thought that was interesting. So could you comment on that?
Yeah, it was one of the most arresting photos in there was Hunter, I can't remember the exact number, I think it was like $80,000 that he spent at a dentist called Smiles on 57th Street in Midtown in New York. And there it's a sort of before and after photo. So there's a photo of him smiling with these peg teeth, awful yellow, hollowed down teeth. And then afterwards, if you notice now, he's always flashing the pearly whites. Just like Joe Biden. Joe Biden had his teeth fixed and he had his hair plugs and the Botox and the whole thing. So Hunter has learned from his dad that teeth are extremely important.
Please.
First, just a little personal note. If anyone wants to have their hair done, I suggest Devine on Wisconsin Avenue. Hassan and his brother were the hairdressers for Jill, and that she doesn't pay them. She never doesn't tip. She pays them. She doesn't tip. And Hassan has now decided he will no longer go to the White House because there's no tip involved. Anyway,
Really?
Please support Hassan at Devine on Wisconsin Avenue. He hates the Bidens. And he will tell you all about it while you're having your hair done. My question is about the new Mrs. Hunter Biden, a South African young Cohen, I think her name is. How's that relationship proceeding? And I'm also curious about the baby mama. She's been testifying, I understand, right?
Yes, the baby mama, it was a former stripper called London Roberts, who actually was working at an establishment not far from here. And when Hunter was... Gentlemen's Club, yes. And Hunter was nothing but a gentleman when he was there. And so London Roberts, anyway, became pregnant and had 3 years ago had Hunter's 4th child. So Hunter, though, denied that it was his child. And in fact, in his memoir, Beautiful Things, he he claims that he can't even remember. He says must have been just one encounter. He can never remember meeting her. That's not true, because the laptop shows that he knew her very well for a very long time. He used to smuggle her into his office building at Swedish House through the back fire door, and over months. And when he was challenged by the building managers, because there's 2 consulates in the building and they were concerned about security issues, he wrote this very long 1,000-word sort of rant at them and thought he was very clever, and said, no, this woman, London Roberts, gave her entire CV, said she was the basketball coach to his daughter, and also to Sasha, I think, Obama, who was his daughter's friend, so dropping the Obama name. And so he knew her extremely well, and she was actually on his payroll at one point. So she had the baby. She had to sue him for paternity. The DNA proved that it was his child. But in his book, on the jacket, in his little biography, he talks about being the father of 3 girls, but doesn't mention the 4th child. So London Roberts, I suppose, is a little bit miffed. So she did appear at the grand jury last Tuesday and testified for several hours. And Hunter has been, a little bit silent lately. I mean, he was... I don't know if you noticed, but he was at the White House a lot. And in fact, there's so much in the early months that that Joe had built for him, his son, his 2-year-old little boy, a swing set on the grounds of the White House, which you can see when Joe's walking back from Marine One to his office. And and we know that Hunter is basically Joe's, no kidding, as Joe would say, his number one or closest, most trusted advisor, because Hunter Biden is actually very intelligent. I didn't believe this, but I was told this by one of Hunter's many therapists. And when I really was fair about it and read his emails and his long missives to himself, he's quite a good writer. He's very self-engrossed, but he is he is intelligent. And so he's always wanted to be an artist or an author. He's both of those now. But he also has political ambitions. And he told his first wife, Kathleen Biden, who I think was a very nice person and badly misled, that after the funeral of his brother, when he had given a eulogy that everyone praised, he said to her in the car on the way back from the funeral, everyone was saying to me, you should go into politics. I'm thinking of it. And she just looked at him and said, are you kidding? You've just been thrown out of the Navy for cocaine use. No. So anyway, he writes about that also in Beautiful Things with great bitterness, saying that she didn't understand him. But anyway, I think that he's concerned at the moment because the grand jury is it seems to be accelerating, starting to bring people in from his personal life and ask them questions. And the other problem for him is that his best friend in business, a guy called Devine Archer, who had been a Yale colleague of his, is going to be sentenced on Monday, I think I mentioned, in the Southern District of New York, for this serious criminal fraud of one of the poorest Indian tribes in America. And one of his co-defendants was jailed for 12 years, another one was jailed for 30 months. And so the prosecutors have asked for 30 months for Devine Archer, and his lawyers have said that that's too much of a hardship for him. So we'll see on Monday. The judge is Judge Ronnie Abrams, who's an Obama appointee and also the wife of one of the Mueller investigators. And she's been very kind to Devon Archer previously. She overturned his original conviction. It was reinstated in the Court of Appeal. He went to the Supreme Court, lost, and so now he's back before her. She also allowed him, when he was out on bail, to travel to 24 different countries. So he went to Turks and Caicos on holidays and so on. But he also went to China and Kazakhstan and Ukraine and Russia doing business, the very places that he and Hunter had been doing. Greg Andre or something? I can't remember the name exactly. Yeah. The new Mrs. Hunter, so her name is Melissa Cohen. They did meet at Chateau Marmont. And he was introduced to her by somebody he met around the pool, and they fell madly in love that night. And, and they were married within weeks. She's South African, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that. I don't know. No. Look, I think she's quite sensible. I mean, she did things like took away his phones, his devices, kind of cleaned him up. I mean, if we believe it, he's cleaned up thanks to her. So, and she is now, the mother of his cute little 2-year-old boy. So, let's hope for her sake and the boy's sake that he is clean. But I think he'll be having some sleepless nights at the moment.
We have time for one last question. So
this is a very difficult question, but right after the laptop came out, when I first saw you on Fox News, there were I've seen some videos of I believe it was friends from Taiwan that was going around alternative news showing him torturing little girls from China. I mean, I don't know, but is this? Can we confirm this?
Yeah, no. That those videos I've seen and heard of, those, they do not exist on the laptop. I believe that that there has been doctored images, photoshopped images that have been put around, and I believe and I don't know why, but some of them have appeared on Chinese sites, and whether it's somebody deliberately trying to muddy the waters to discredit the laptop, whether it's somebody, I don't know. All I know is that I did look at it. It doesn't exist. And I think the problem with concentrating on this alleged pedophilia, which so many people do, of course, is that, if there was pedophilia, if he was a pedophile, that is the worst crime of all. Everything else that's on the laptop would, just pale into insignificance. And so, of course, I would have concentrated on that. But there's no evidence of it. And in fact, I mean, I have seen much more of Hunter Biden's sex life than I would like to have seen. But everything I have seen is that he is a heterosexual who likes women of his own age. Women, the prostitutes are in their 20s. And there's no evidence that he has any peculiar sexual preferences.
Yeah. Well, that may be an appropriate place to end this conversation. Yeah, exactly. But I want to thank everybody. And as we wrap up, I want to mention that everybody should grab a copy of the Champion Women profile we did, that Charlotte Hayes writes this series, and we profile wonderful women, and including Miranda. So please take a look at that. And I also wanted to mention that, Elisa did a great job talking about Independent Women's Forum and kind of our history. And I do want to encourage you to come and check out both IWF.org, but also Independent Women's Network. Because we would love for everybody here to sign up. We're trying to connect people around the country so we can start making a difference. We are the women's group that really likes men, so you guys are allowed to sign up for sure. We welcome male members. That we're trying to, we've started, we have a Virginia chapter that's here and helped host this tonight. We want everybody to get involved so we can both take back our communities and our country. So thank you very much.